Okay, this is the feedback from the suitable essay paper, the first section, which was, the Hatshepsut, the first question. Now, this question was the 10-mark question. Describe the political and religious roles of the king and queen in the 17th dynasty and early 18th dynasty. Now, it's important that you understand that Hatshepsut was the 18th dynasty. We've also got to talk about the 17th dynasty and the role of the kings and the queens. And we must separate them out. We can't just talk about them as the same thing. So let's have a look at the marking guidelines for this question. Provides detailed and accurate description of the political and religious roles of the king and queen in the 17th dynasty and early 18th dynasty. So that tells us what we needed to have looked at. Develops a clear, comprehensive and coherent response using appropriate terms and concepts accurately. All right. This is the section from the booklet, which some of you are not looking at enough. All right. So again, as I said to you in class, you're less likely to get a specific question on this because normally they ask questions about Hatshepsut rather than this. But however, they've shown us that they can do it, they may do it, so we need to learn it. All right, so the political and religious roles of the kings. Okay, so we've got here the Egyptians perceived kingship as fundamental to society and the cosmos. Main role of the king was to maintain art. You needed to say that, according to O'Connor and Silverman. We need to look at the images that were required of the pharaoh. Names in a cartouche, formal regalia, the titulary, the Hatshepsut festival of Jubilee. You needed to break up your response into two areas, which is what no one did perfectly. You needed to look at the king as a religious figure. King was Horus, descended from Ra, linked to Osiris, son of Amun, maintained Ma'at, sole ritualist theological leader, maintained cultural links through temple ritual and also through governance, okay, raising revenue, ruling in conformity to Ma'at, and was also commander-in-the-chief of the army who overthrew foreigners and enemies to maintain the cosmic order, which is the maintaining Ma'at, to make sure that maintaining the balance of chaos. Okay, so the king's actions as subordinate to the creator god parallel the divine process in the celestial realm and the netherworld. King as a secular ruler, which people didn't do as well. Supreme political leader and warlord. Okay, oversaw bureaucracy of state and the judicial functions. Royal palace dominated life. Administrative system, so defended against external and internal enemies. So again, that's linked over here with being the military leader. Generated revenue in produce and services, maintained building programs, maintain a minimum level of social order to meet the above ends, and maintain a fundamental basis of well-being. So you need to divide it up. King as a religious figure, king as the administrator and ruler. Okay, so then you need it, and you can't just sort of use Hatshepsut as the sole example. Okay, Hatshepsut's role as an Incan pharaoh, maintain art, cosmic order. As king, she was a link between gods and humans, etc., etc. And we've got a whole bunch of examples here. So that's linking that here. This question, you didn't have to do that as much. Some examples would have been good. All right. Now, if we move down here to the next part, political and religious roles of the queens in the 17th and 18th dynasties. Most of these are from Robbins, who specialises in women in ancient Egypt. Royal women in ancient Egypt derive their importance from their relationship to the king. Their main roles are to provide the successor, as the king's mother, and the wives and daughters. Okay, we don't know much about them as such. Was queenship divine? Vulture headdress worn by queens marked the divine aspect of queenship. Ideal was the successor to the king came from the king's principal wife. We have the heiress theory here that you could have spoken about. The richer role of the king's mother and principal wife. And then you've got Hatshepsut's royal female role models. Now, some of you who got the 9 out of 10 spoke about some of these examples here. Ahmose, Nefertari, Ahotep II. Okay, and you also need to talk about God's wife of Amun specifically as an example here. So there's those 2 pages there would have been plenty for you to get full marks for that question. I'll have a quick look at this example. We'll quickly read through it. This is from Joe. Political and religious roles of the kings and queens in the 17th dynasty and early 18th dynasty centered around the cosmic concept of Ma'at and the expansion of Egypt's domain, but it doesn't mention administration of the empire and of Egypt itself. As a religious and political leader, the most prominent role of king during the early 17th and 18th dynasties was the maintenance of Ma'at. This was achieved by many ways. For instance, it was customary role for the king to engage in prosperous building program that would generate jobs for and wealth for Egypt, and also the religious role, providing a dwelling place for the gods and a place for the cult to worship. For example, such a role was fulfilled by Hatshepsut through Dirubari, Karnak, Spiros Adamatos, and her two tombs. This role was prominent in maintaining art. It would showcase the king's dedication to Amun. However, it would be a symbol of reforming peace, especially from the chaos of the Hyksos. That's a good example of how things changed. Another prominent role of the king was a portrayal of himself as a traditional warrior pharaoh who was willing to extend the boundaries of Egypt and enhance its domain. This is after, again, the defeat of the Hyksos. This was referred to as an expansionist policy and including collections of booties from conquered lands and ensuring the defence of Egypt remained strong. For example, leading campaigns to both conquer lands and exploit their resources. This was exemplified by Hatshepsut, who initiated a comparable foreign policy, according to Robbins, to those before her. For instance, she successfully fulfilled the criteria of the expansionist policy in mediating expansion to Punt. Nonetheless, kings of the 17th and 18th dynasty were also expected to provide for their people through the resources they obtained from other lands. One of the most significant roles of the king in the 17th and 18th dynasty was to act as a link between the gods and his people, ensure that the state god Amun and other gods were praised effectively. This was significant in maintaining art. King would achieve this by building temples such as Karnak or by erecting monuments dedicated to Amun. Hatshepsut achieved this through erecting the obelisks. Another role of the kings was to project an image of success and pride that linked Egypt to the fortune of heavens. This would be achieved by adopting a fivefold titulary that was linked to the god Horus and connected to Ma'at. For instance, one of Hatshepsut's names was Horus, mighty of Kars. Moreover, kings were expected to maintain a strong link with the bureaucracy in order to enhance their political status and maintain social order. So we could have had a bit more on the administrative role of the king there, and that's what sort of dropped it down from a 10 to a 9. Additionally, the roles of the queens in the 17th and 18th dynasties were also significant. Their most prominent role was as God's wife Amun, and would entail the linking of this aspect to their queenhood to Amun. They could achieve this by leading worship to the god in temples. Further, queens were expected to be the mothers of gods and ensure the proper upbringing of future kings. They were also expected to project a positive, fierce image of Egypt, much like Ahmose and Hatshepsut. So we've got some examples of earlier queens. Notwithstanding, as a whole, the most significant roles of the kings and queens was maintaining of Ma'at. This was achieved through a melding of political and religious life to ensure the gods, specifically Amun, were constantly praised. So that wasn't too bad. Needed more on the bureaucracy and probably could have had a little bit more of an example there with the queens as well. So it was a solid response but needs refining. The king had two roles, religious and secular, and only the religious was really discussed in much depth. Make more of the religious importance of buildings and learn more examples of other earlier kings because they weren't examples of earlier kings there as well. Okay.